that Professor has, or the journals that Professor has published in. So welcome, Professor, to Kenyatta University. We are looking forward to listening to your words of wisdom. We are really excited to have you here this morning. That done, I also wish to just proceed to introduce Mr. Edwin Osundwa. Welcome, Mr. Osundwa. Welcome to Kenyatta University and to the School of Education Conference this morning. So Mr. Osundwa is one of our guest speakers as well. And he has over 15 years experience in designing and implementing and monitoring development projects that promote inclusion and human rights. Edwin has been in various positions of management, leading and providing strategic direction on matters advocacy, program cycle management, organizational strengthening, building authentic partnerships, and providing advisory support on inclusion. Edwin holds a bachelor's degree in special education from Kenyatta University. Welcome back home, Mr. Osundwa. He holds a diploma in management of non-governmental organizations and a master's degree in development studies from St. Paul's University. It's important to note that he's very enthusiastic about working together with the most marginalized to bring about positive change in the society. Edwin is a country director of an organization known as CBM Global, which is an international non-governmental organization that works to promote disability inclusion with specific emphasis on mental health and high eye health interventions, humanitarian response, and climate change adaptations. So that is Mr. Edwin Osundwa, who is the other guest speaker that we have this morning. I want to just encourage us to give them a loud applause. The way we do it, the Kenyan way. Karibu sana. I also recognize the presence of our guest who has come with the professor. Phil, welcome, karibu sana. So we will begin our session with a presentation from Mr. Edwin Osundwa. How we have planned this morning, so as to save time, we will have the 3 presentations. There's one more guest that will join us virtually. So we will have the 3 presentations, and thereafter, we will have a question and answer session. So please just note down your questions, note down your comments, and you will have time at the end to be able to engage with the guests. Karibu sana, Mr. Osundwa, you can proceed.
Fine. Thank you so much for the opportunity for us to engage in this important dialogue, which I hope can and will stimulate discussion and learning. So when I got the invitation to come and make my presentation, I thought about education and the question around reimagining education in a globalized society. And what became very clear to me is that we cannot reimagine education until and unless we reimagine the different constituencies that benefit from education. Although education is supposed to impact everybody, although education is meant to impact everybody, but it impacts everybody in a different way, because we appreciate that education unlocks each person's potential. And therefore, it's important for us to see education from that individual point of view. And so, as I thought about this discussion, I decided to zoom in on a particular narrow focus, which I call preconditions for inclusive education. So my sub-theme is therefore preconditions for inclusive education. We have talked so much about inclusive education for learners with disabilities. We've also talked about inclusive education for other marginalized learners, girls, refugees, and many other communities that have one challenge or the other, which limits them from accessing mainstream education. Now, there are various actors that have tried through policy and practice to promote inclusive education, but I think we still have many barriers that limit inclusive education to be fully realized and become part and parcel of our education system. I want to look at 6 preconditions for inclusive education. For anybody who aspires to talk about inclusive education, it's important for you to consider these 6 preconditions to inclusive education. The first one is accessibility. And accessibility must not be construed in its narrowest sense to mean getting access
There's some power loss.
Can't hear the speaker, sorry.
Yeah, there was Apollos, just a minute. Ongeza monitor.
Information in formats that they can easily. So we are talking about, for example, live stream. We are talking about getting information to them in digital formats. We are talking about looking at information in grade. We're also talking about learners who may have other conditions like dyslexia, having information in formats that they can interact with. We're talking about learners with low vision, having enough lighting in their classrooms and different places to enable them actually access information. When we talk about accessibility, we also talk about taking into account the needs of other categories of learners with disabilities. So, for example, we are looking at learners with psychosocial disabilities. They need environment to provide for short intervals of break. For example, in a classroom setting, you may need to have break rooms for them to break and rejuvenate. Their concentration or attention span might be short, so you need room where they can break, go, rejuvenate, and come back. That is all under accessibility. So it is not limited to the physical infrastructure at all. That's the first precondition for you to talk about inclusivity. The second precondition for you to think about is assistive devices. Without learners with disabilities being able to access appropriate assistive devices, they cannot come to school. They cannot learn. We are looking at learners with mobility disability. They definitely will need different aids or assistive devices to support them come to school, interact, play, engage in social activities, and so on and so forth. We are, for example, looking at sitting aids, standing aids, wheelchairs, frames, walking frames. All these are important assistive devices. But devices go beyond the physical devices. We are also looking at hearing aids for learners with low vision, learners with hearing impairments. We're talking about spectacles for learners with visual impairment. We are talking about speech support systems for learners who may have difficulties with speech. All this and many more help learners to participate meaningfully in education. Without such devices, then it's not possible for us to talk about inclusive education for the third precondition for inclusive education is teacher preparation, teacher training, and everything around teacher capacity. Teachers must have knowledge about inclusion. Teachers must have the right attitude to appreciate the diversity of inclusion. Teachers must have the right equipment to support them work within an inclusive environment, an inclusive classroom setting, and within an inclusive school environment. Was training to appreciate the vast needs that are presented by our language. For example, a teacher knows sign language.
Then coming from my phone.
And right format a teacher which can customize learning for unique disability. You can work with parents. Research work.
Simply siko to bag. Lazima ni lazima nibai.
We are looking at a teacher who can work very closely with other institutions because some learners they need teaching assistance, teacher aid. They may also need auxiliary services like those with transcribers, support in producing materials in English. So teacher preparedness, teacher capacity, teacher attitude are important components that would prepare and support a teacher who will play an important role in an institution. And we think about it from a very globalized point. I can imagine us talking about we have set aside X amount of money for special education, but that is not different amounts of money to support. So for example, one learner would need a budget specific to assistive devices. Another learner would need a budget that is quite specific to the support services that they need. For example, the services of a teacher, assistant. Other learners will need budgets that are specific to their medical requirements. So we have to try and change the perspective so that we don't start with special education or inclusive education as the goal, but we take into account the needs and requirements of individual learners. So when we get to budget from a learner-centered point, we then can compute and get our budget right. And in that way, we can be able to support our learners. Achieve the educational outcomes, and that most importantly, we can monitor how that money has been used to promote the learning of our learners in an inclusive setting. The fifth component that is very important, or the precondition for inclusive education to work, is about data. Data remains very critical for planning, but it's not just about data that looks at numbers, but we want to try and stretch our data to capture the numbers, the disability category. We also want to look at the age group. We want to look at gender. We want to look at the particular needs of the learner. For example, what devices they require. We want to look at the contexts, other variables that affect the learner, because the learner might be coming from a hardship area. The learner might be coming from a single household, a single family house that actually may have less support. We want to look at all these factors and document so that when we are designing interventions or learning outcomes for the learner with disability, we include all those elements. When we work around data, we must not lose sight of the fact that data can be misleading. There are so many sources of data, and some of them are not as accurate. So we must work towards triangulating data so that we get the accurate data that we need to use. We must make data data collection an ongoing activity, because without that, then we use stale or old data, and that makes our planning ineffective. Finally, an important precondition for inclusive education is that it is a progressive process to supporting the realization of education for learners with disabilities. So we must not assume that there's a quick and neat break from special education to inclusive education. We must appreciate that if we push all learners to inclusive education without these preconditions, then we are disadvantaging the learners. So bringing any particular learner to a school that does not have proper devices, good infrastructure, accessibility, well-prepared teachers, good budgets, we may be disadvantaging them a great deal. So we must look at inclusive education as a progressive process, and we must appreciate that when we start off, we tick the boxes, we qualify all that we are doing to ensure that the provisions are aligned to the needs of the learner, so that when we are transitioning the learners to school, we are confident that they are going there not to be subjected to barriers, but to be actually supported by an enabling environment for them to learn. One quick question that I would like to pose to all of us. We may have interacted with learners in different settings where they are said to be in or learning in inclusive environments. If you look back, do you think the environments that our learners are in meet these very important preconditions for inclusive education? And if they don't meet these important preconditions, are they really learning? Is learning happening? And is inclusive education really inclusive? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osundwa, for reminding us of very critical issues in as far as inclusive education is concerned. You have spoken about the critical preconditions that we need to observe as we think inclusive education, and some of these include accessibility. That we should just think of the physical accessibility, but we need to think of much more in terms of accessibility as a precondition. You have talked about availability of devices. I didn't know that my spectacles is one of such of those devices that are required. And teacher preparedness as being very key as well. And the budgetary aspect of it. You have also alluded to data management as being very critical, even as we think of inclusivity. And finally, the progressive nature of inclusivity as well. Thank you very much for what you have shared with us. Can we just clap for Mr. Osundwa, even as we welcome our second speaker, Professor, welcome.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and it is a great honor to be here with you at Kenyatta University, and I send greetings from Dr. Peter Dearnui. Peter is a graduate of this college, and Peter is a colleague of mine at Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers, Florida. And he has just the warmest things to say about his experience here as a student. I'd like to just begin by commending the School of Education. I do a lot of work in the economics of education, but I've also been a university president for 22 years in 4 different states and worked for 8 different governors. So the politics I will get into the politics of where we're going, because the theme of this conference certainly is refocusing education in a globalized society. And there are lessons to be learned from the United States in higher education, as well as England that has followed the path of the United States. But first, let me commend the work that this university has done. A lot of our graduates from our universities go on to be doctors. They go on to be lawyers. They go on to be engineers, computer scientists, and they make a lot more money than our teachers do. And they spend their careers, our teachers spend their careers educating the next generation of contributors to society. So I've always been under the impression in the economics of human capital development, I've always pointed to the fact that the greatest graduate a university can produce is a school teacher. The greatest graduate, the greatest economic graduate that provides the economic benefits to society, the societal benefits that a school teacher does every single year in a room with maybe 15, 20, 30, even 40 students, the impact that that one teacher has on a 25-year career on so many young minds and so many new, what I would say, human capital creations in our economy, there is no greater graduate that provides no greater societal benefit to society. Many focus on the individual benefit. I'm speaking specifically of the societal benefit, which is a benefit that that graduate or that student goes on to contribute to the rest of society by being a contributor to society. So I commend the university for having such a focus on schools, on the next generation of students. It is all of our goal to make sure that the next generation of children, the next generation of students have more economic and more educational opportunities than our generation or the generations before them. And that's one reason why my speech today is very important. The United States, for many decades, was the first to open up widespread access to higher education. And it really started after World War II, when the United States said, we're going to give 10 million veterans coming back from the war a free college education. And not everybody was in favor of it, but it was called the GI Bill. The GI Bill went on to create a new economy for the United States in the 50s and 60s. More importantly, though, the GI Bill was funded by the common citizens and by the public in general. The public paid the societal benefits that the society accrued was paid by the entire public and by public funds to public institutions, of which 80% of the students in the United States attend public colleges and public universities. Something happened, however, in 1972 at the federal government level when we decided to turn the federal funding of higher education into a market-based approach. Instead of giving institutions like this one, or like my institution or former institutions, the funding to educate more students and to stay affordable, we gave it to the student to take anywhere they wanted it to go, which also meant they could take the federal funding to private institutions, which eventually became for-profit private institutions. So we became the Wild West of higher education, with public funding going to anybody and everybody that could get accredited by private accreditors. So what has happened with this system at the federal level? Prior to this program, the Federal Direct Student Aid Program and Loan Program, states primarily funded our public institutions. States provided 80% of the funding for public higher education. Today, states only supply about 25%, and we've completely shifted to a tuition and fee-based system, thinking that higher education is simply an individual benefit, not a societal benefit, and therefore the individual student should pay for it. So today, the United States has gone from being a leader in the world in higher education to being, as I will point out, one that's losing ground every year. And today, the biggest issue in American higher education is the fact that students have $1.8 trillion of student loan debt, the second largest debt in the United States behind home mortgages, and twice that of credit card debt. That's impacting nearly 50 million students that are walking out of our campuses substantially in debt with an average of about $40,000 per student. You compare $40,000 to an average teacher salary in the state of Florida. Teachers on average in Florida make $47,000 a year, but they're leaving college with $40,000 in debt. So the point I want to emphasize is that when society paid for widespread access, and we were affordable and for most places still free up until the early 1980s, the United States led the world in this category. Among 30 OECD countries, our 55 to 64-year-old and 65 to 74-year-old population has the highest percentage of people with a college degree of any country in the world. Our older generation has the highest percentage, and that's because society saw it in their best interest to educate that population, to keep college free, and to keep college very affordable. Today, our 25 to 34-year-olds in the United States rank 16th of those 30 countries in terms of individuals that have completed college. And that is declining every 2 years. And I predict it'll be 18th in the next 5 years. So what we have done is shift the entire cost, the bulk of the cost of higher education, onto the backs of the younger generation. So the older generation doesn't have to have increased tax support to keep colleges free and to keep colleges affordable. About 12 years ago, England decided they wanted to follow the United States market-based model need. They have done the same thing. Now England is looking at a major student loan indebtedness crisis in England. And at the same time, 12 years ago, Scotland said, no, we're going to stay free in Scotland, much like Scandinavia and Germany and many other nations in Greece, where they see it as a societal benefit. Therefore, society is the one that's going to contribute to the education of the next generation of students. The United States has said, no, that's an individual benefit, and the students should pay for their own college, and society doesn't have to pay for it. So in other words, if you see this as a taxation shift, it is an intergenerational taxation transfer from the older generation that is well off, that is better economically advanced, to the younger generation that's trying to start college careers and trying to get off to a good start when they start their career. This system is a menacing model to try to duplicate and follow. We don't know what to do right now with such massive debt, and it is the number one major issue in higher education. I just so happen to be fortunate to work with President Obama on many of these issues. Number one is somehow keeping public funding from going to for-profit universities that are leading many, many students and graduates into massive debt and student loan defaults. Now, I'm fortunate to work with the First Lady, Joe Biden, and his administration to try to make our first 2 years of college free. Again, like we did in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. We have done this in 9 states, and we are hoping to see if we can get it done in 50 states, somehow reducing the cost that our students are having to adopt and our students are having to pay from the first day they set on a college campus. We are the only country in the world that has decided that federal public funds, whether it's a grant fund or a loan fund, can go to public institutions, it can go to private institutions, and it can even go to for-profit institutions. Unaccountable, non-transparent for-profit institutions. So we were the country that everybody, at least in the issue of massification of higher education, the rest of the world adopted greater access principles and moved away from the elitism of higher education in the 90s and the early 2000s. We did it in the 50s and 60s. But what we've done since then is not a model for anybody to follow. We have shifted the cost of higher education onto the backs of the next generation of students so that the older generation that benefited from free college and low-cost college, so they won't have to pay for the taxation, they shift the taxation to the nearly 50 million students that are now in massive debt, which is impacting the economy in multiple ways, in consumer spending, in housing buying or renting, in car purchases, in family formations. The younger generation is waiting longer to get married and having less children because of this debt issue is so significant. So this is a cautionary tale about how do you go from first in the world in college success for a generation to 16th, and how do you end up with, as I looked at the numbers, if this was in either Tanzanian or Kenyan shillings, it's 300 trillion shillings in Kenyan shillings of student loan debt. So we've got to have a lot of work to do in going back to what we used to do. But currently we must figure out how to alleviate the fact that the younger generation is walking out of college in too much debt where they can't buy homes, they can't buy goods, they can't buy cars, and they have to pick careers based on how they can pull themselves out of debt. Unlike a school teacher that starts by making very little, but still has the same amount of debt. So I'm very concerned that our ability, we have a teaching shortage in the United States. Well, it doesn't surprise me. Who's going to go into teaching when the pay is so low and the debt is so high? And that is a warning for our colleges of education. Because as I pointed out from the beginning, the greatest societal impact of a graduate is a school teacher. Is that kindergarten teacher, primary school teacher, secondary school teacher, because of the impact they have on so many lives and the human capital gains that we all benefit from those teachers. So when you look at the United States, don't buy into what many have said for previous decades, where we did have a very affordable higher education system. Today, we do not. And it is not a model that other countries should follow. In fact, the model you should compare yourself to is what has Scotland done versus what has England done. England adopted our model and now has a debt crisis of students after 12 years. Scotland said, we're going to stay free and we're going to let the Scottish citizens pay for college access and keeping their institutions affordable. So I've spoken to the U.S. Congress because I have said that the federal government, through this market-based neoliberalism approach, is in the process of ruining many of our institutions of higher education. And as a president, we have incentivized states to shift their funding, which is common public funding, to tuition and fees, which goes onto the backs of students, and which ultimately leads to student loan indebtedness problems. As a president, I watched for 22 years. I had 16 years of facing state budget reductions. Then, those 16 years, we were asked to raise tuition and fees to offset those reductions. That's how the states are backing out of their responsibility on the backs of these federal loan programs. So it's a cautionary tale of where the United States is right now. We tried to alleviate some of the student loan indebtedness issues recently, but the Supreme Court struck it down and said President Biden doesn't have the authority to alleviate 20 to 30% of the student loan debt problem. We will try again, and we will keep trying again to alleviate this problem so our next generation of students are going to be better equipped economically and better equipped to be more productive in society than spending 10, 20, 30 years in debt from paying back a college experience that should have been supported by the older generation in the United States. So that's my cautionary tale. And once again, it is such an honor to be here. And I commend this great university for putting so many teachers in the classroom, and the multiplier effect of a school teacher in every grade level is so pronounced, and it's so important to every community and every economy. The only way the United States is going to have a generation that has better economic and educational opportunity in the next generation is to alleviate this debt problem and to shift the cost back to the common citizens who have the capacity to make college affordable, to keep college affordable, and even to make the first 2 years of college free once again. It's not a novel idea. We did it for so long, and we need to go back to what we did when we were first in the world in the generation that experienced college when it was free and when it was affordable. So thank you for listening, and to the group online. And I look forward to many of your questions, because I know this issue is an important issue, not just in the OECD countries, but the fee issue, the tuition issue, is a political football that gets politicized, and ultimately the students and the children don't have the political voice that the older generation has. So thank you all, and it is an honor for us to be here, for my wife and me to be here. Thank you very much.
Powerful indeed, just like Mr. Osundwa's presentation. Thank you very much, Professor, for putting into perspective the higher education situation in the United States, particularly in regards to the funding. I couldn't help but compare the situation in the United States to our own context here. And there are a lot of similarities that we can draw from those two scenarios. As you started your speech, I wrote down a question, which I deleted later. I wanted to ask, why are teachers the least paid? But then you said, we need to not focus on the individual, but we need to focus on the impact this teacher has on the society. And so I deleted my question because I got the answer to it. Yeah, you have informed us of the struggle that the students in the United States have in terms of a very heavy loan debt burden, and that the society no longer quite supports their education as such. And so they are getting into their jobs with that burden on their backs, and they have to figure out how can this money be paid. I think that is the situation we have here in this country. So even as we look up to the global south for some of these solutions, we need to be careful in as far as what is it we can customize and make good use of here. You have reminded us of the critical role of a teacher in impacting lives. That has really excited me because I am a teacher. And so I'm sure sitting here as teachers, we really need to be proud of the critical role we play in changing lives throughout our teaching career. You have alluded to the effort the government is making to try and alleviate this problem of having a heavy debt burden on students, to try and make it affordable. And I'm sure that's also where we are in this country. To some extent, the government was supporting private universities, and that situation has since changed. So I'm looking forward to the many questions that will come up and the engagement that we have with the listeners online and in this room as well. Let's take a moment again to just clap for Professor for sharing such important information. I want to take this opportunity to welcome the next guest, the ICT team. Could you let me know if the guest is online? Yes.
There is from Dr. Francis Kirimi. He says, thank you for the informative presentation, Prof. Please expound more on implications of those heavy debt burden to quality and
Yeah, thank you,
completion
Carol.
of education. Then there is, Prof, another one.
Just a moment before we go into the question and answer session. There's a third guest who is supposed to do a presentation virtually. Is she online? Professor Jeanette Dials from Mariano Marcos State University. You could check for me. Yes? No? Okay. Fine. So we get into the question and answer session. And this is a moment for you to engage with Mr. Osundwa and as well as Professor. Carol, you'd like us to start off with the questions online? Okay. Yeah. Kindly just say your name and then ask the question. Can we agree that we do it in a few seconds so that we can accommodate as many questions as possible?
Okay, thank you very much, all the two presenters, but my question goes to the professor. In my country, World Bank advised the universities to make sure that postgraduate students pay, even undergraduate students get loans. That was in the 90s. And you realize that that is the trend globally because education is being governed by the political economy. Don't you think until we change the philosophy of the political economy, we can't change the economics of education? Thank you.
The question is a very good that most countries are wrestling with. The 90s, 80s, 70s, we saw higher education as something that we all wanted to expand and give everybody an opportunity to. And it was, in fact, it was President Obama that was the first to say that every student in the United States should go to at least 2 years of college. But what we didn't do is say who's going to pay for that. And it does ebb and flow with the economy. But having said that, we've had very good economic years. In my last 22 years as a president, we've had good years and bad years. So for every 1 year that we had positive funding, we had 3 bad ones. That means that the states would cut our budgets and they would turn to the presidents of the universities to raise fees and raise tuition. So every 3 out of 4 years we have been doing this, and now we wake up with this student debt problem and a tuition and fee problem and a lack of public support problem. Our public universities are getting 50% less funding than they did in 1980. And 25 states are spending less on public higher education than they did in 1991. So we have completely shifted from the societal gain and societal benefit and societal contribution of higher education to simply saying the student should pay for it because they're the only one that benefits from their education, which is not the case at all. And if you take a look at social economic data, you will find out that every citizen in this country will benefit when you educate more students and graduate more students. They become tax-paying citizens. They don't go into poverty and rely on social programs. They don't get incarcerated. They actually contribute to a better environment, a cleaner environment, cleaner air, cleaner water. And the list goes on and on. What higher educated students go on to do in our economy. They create new businesses, they create new jobs, just like the GI Bill did when they educated 10 million veterans in the late 40s and early 50s. It created an entirely new economy with new ideas, new industry, new technology, because we educated the next generation better. So this is an important discussion for every country. And it boils down to choices. It boils down to one word, choice. What are we going to support and how are we going to do it? It's a choice issue. So we have gone way too far on the individual side of this. And now we're trying to wiggle our way out and figure a way to bring back what we used to do, which is to support the next generation of college graduates and let them build the new economy that we know they will do. So I hope this helps with the question.
Thank you very much, Professor. I want to take 2 questions from the online audience. Dr. Kirimi.
Oh, thank you, the presenter, and thank you, Professor, for that innovative and insightful presentation. I'm just wondering, Prof, higher education in United States, as you have said, has really a burden to the students. And what are the implications to quality and completion, bearing in mind that most of the people who access higher education come from different social and economic backgrounds? 2, you have raised the issue of choices. What were the basis or what informed the choices of the government to give education to individual students? Thank you.
Professor, we can take 2 questions before you can respond. Yeah. So maybe the next one from
Joyce.
Okay, thank you very much for those very insightful presentations. My question or comment goes to the first presenter, Mr. Osundwa, about the preconditions for inclusive education. We from the language teaching discipline or language of instruction, we are very concerned about the language of instruction and how important this is to learning. So my comment or my question is, would you consider the language of instruction as a precondition for inclusive education? I'm thinking of a situation where children who don't know, say, English are being taught in English. Thank you.
Naomi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, my comment goes to Osundwa. Please, if you would explain what your organization is doing to ensure that some of these preconditions at the university training, particularly of teachers, awareness is done to an acceptable levels. Then to Prof, thank you very much for the highlight, especially on the economics of education. I'm particularly interested, what is the role of IMF and World Bank as far as privatization of higher education is concerned? Because this is a very critical issue, connecting it with the structural adjustment programs that started in the 1980s. Thank you very much.
You can take one more question.
I have a
or-
mic. I have a mic. Thank you so much. My name is Professor Kisilu Kombo, Kenyatta University in the Department of Education Foundations. I have 2 questions. One to the gentleman who spoke on inclusive education. I just wanted to find out from him, given that the new CBC, we have a common unit called inclusive education. Given what you have presented and how you have done it, do you see its future? Do you see it being done the way you have put it to us? Then to the professor, I want to say that I'm very excited because you have done it so well. I could myself have not done it better than you, because you have taken us down the memory lane on where we began and when rain started beating us. But on really looking at the whole thing, I was left wondering whether at one time the students will be left free, whether they will go to the university and study without having stress. My colleague has spoken about IMF and World Bank, and you have not spoken about it because this is a condition that we have to go that direction of charging the students a lot of money. And you, as you seem to have escaped from that particular demand of the World Bank. But I'm just wondering also, and you could also help us understand, whether we have a situation, and you see a situation, at least of us having a free education, which will be given to university education. Given our economies are struggling, and America, when we are here, all of us, we want to go to America, our students keep on talking about America and things. But somehow, you have said that there is a lot of pressure. That particular burden is on them. I think it is even more there than here, because here you can go to your farm and people can assist you. But I'm asking you, when you look at the cost-benefit analysis, and since you are in economics, do you see a situation where these students will be able, after they have gone through the education system, they will be free without having this particular burden? Do you have anywhere in the world where students really go through without any problem of fees and things like that? And the other question that I want is linked to this one, is that whether yourself, you are an economist, as you said, you appeared to be in the team of President Obama and also the current president in the US. Have you done a study to find out when they are so much stressed, because we can also be able to learn from you, when they are so much stressed, are they productive at their places of work even when they are employed? So that at least we can be able to say, yes, we have learned from you and we can avoid the mistakes that your country has done. Thank you so much. And when you go back.
Thank you, Professor Kombo. I can give the mic to Mr. Osundwa to respond to 2 questions.
I think they were, okay, thanks. There were 3 questions. Language is a precondition for education. Not just inclusive education, but education as a whole. Because it's through language or communication that children start interactions. Now, when you talk about learners with disabilities, there are different categories. And one example is that of learners with hearing impairments. So when learners who are deaf need to benefit from an inclusive education system, the precondition there is that the teacher must definitely have competence in sign language. The school community must, to some degree, have competence in sign language. Without these preconditions, then learning will not happen. So it is up to you, it's up to the school community, it's up to parents and other actors to determine the extent to which language, such as sign language, has been absorbed in the system and it's being used for the learner to then join inclusive education. The second question was about whether inclusive education as a course being taught can have any benefit or will have any benefit. And as I said during my presentation, teacher preparation, teacher capacity is critical for inclusive education. And one sure way to promote inclusive education is to prepare the teacher. Now, as universities embark on the journey of offering training on inclusive education to all teachers, that is the foundation upon which inclusive education rests. So I am happy that that unit on inclusive education is a single step, but very important in the course of helping all teachers appreciate what inclusive education is. The third question was around what my organization does to promote the preconditions to inclusive education. And I would say that the vision of my organization is a world where inclusion is promoted and the rights of everybody, including those of persons with disabilities, are realized. So for us, we are always open to promoting projects that tear down barriers to inclusion. So we can partner with anybody. We can support financially and technically anybody who is interested in initiating programs and projects that tear down barriers to inclusion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Osundwa, for responding to those 3 questions. And Professor, it's your time.
Yeah, I'll try to remember. I think there were 3 questions in there. And the first one, we're just now starting to realize the consequences of student debt on the economy. By that, I mean, that graduates of college in the last 15 years are not buying houses until about 2 decades after their parents did. So they're waiting longer to buy their first house. They're waiting longer to buy a vehicle. They're waiting longer. For every 1% increase in student debt to earnings ratio, their consumer spending goes down 4%. And that's at a grocery store, that's at, you name all the consumer spending areas. The mental health problem, you mentioned stress on students walking out the door when they have substantial debt. There are more mental health problems with our students that are leaving in debt. Our Black students are leaving with more debt. Our Hispanic students and our lower income students are leaving with more debt and take longer to pay back that debt. And if you think about the whole process back in 1972 was supposed to expand access to low-income students and give them more choices. It hasn't given them any more choices. As college costs have gone up, the richest institutions in the United States serve less low-income students than they did in 72. The Ivy League, the richest 8 universities on the planet with their endowments have the least amount of low-income students in the United States. So it hasn't expanded access for low-income students. It has inflated the costs, leading other institutions and public institutions to try to chase the great dollar. And by that, many public universities that had missions of serving their in-state students have now turned to out-of-state students and international students who pay 3 to 4 times as much, so they don't have to serve the in-state populations. And in most cases, in most poorer states, that means they're not serving low-income students of color, in the South particularly. A recent study just came out for the New York Times and said low-income access to colleges and universities since 2010, on average, has gone down 2.5%. That's every institution that was compared. So this privatization, as you mentioned, this privatization, unfortunately, privates have always had a privatization model. It's been a tuition and fee model. But now we have publics doing the exact same thing that privates have been doing by going after the only students that have the most money, which are out-of-state white students that can pay 3 and 4 times as much to cross a state border and go to your institution. So this privatization is also privatizing the original missions of our great public universities. And you have some institutions that serve as many as 70% of their students are not from their own state. And 80%, they're coming from other states because they're charged 3 and 4 times as much. So this privatization, this issue that we've talked about is dangerously changing the original missions of our public institutions so that they look more like private institutions at the end of the day and less like public institutions that original missions were set up to serve in-state, low-income, or middle-income, or, as they said in the Land-Grant Act in 1862, serve the industrial classes. In 1862, the industrial classes didn't have any access to higher education in the United States. But our public institutions were set up to serve those students who did not have access. So we're in a bit of a pickle here, in a dilemma that our private institutions are doing pretty well because they can raise tuition and get the loan money. Our public institutions, instead of being more public, are simply chasing private institutions into this privatization wave and trying to be more private than the other public institution. So that's a challenging dilemma. The real loser in all this is the low-income student that it was intended to serve back in 1972. They don't have any more access than they did in 72, especially to the richest institutions that spend the most amount of money on the richest population of students. So that's why we're working to try to bring back what used to happen. So thank you for your questions. I hope that helps a little bit.
In the privatization of higher education, the role of IMF and World Bank in the privatization of higher education. Yeah, World Bank and IMF, International Monetary Fund.
Interestingly enough, an individual I worked with, Walter McMahon, on probably the world's expert on societal benefit and measuring it. The International Fund, the World Bank, and other international funds that have funded greater access to education learned an important lesson about 20 years ago. The lesson was that they gave money, loaned money to countries to expand access to schools and expand access to other educational institutions. What a number of those countries did is they expanded access and they let the families determine who went to school. What they did is they let the men go to school and expanded access for the men. The problem with that is the gross domestic product and the economic productivity of the country never improved. Because what we know and what the World Bank learned and what all the international funding organizations learned the hard way was the best thing society can do is fund the education of the girls and the women first. Because first of all, women and girls are finishing school in much higher degrees than the men are. We've got a male crisis in colleges and universities, but also that goes along with birth control, education, jobs, careers. The countries were able to use those funds by expanding access to girls and women. And it took a long time for the World Bank and the International Monetary Funds to figure this out. And when we in the United States put pressure on people like me as a president to improve your completion rate, I say, well, get me more women, and I will improve our completion rate. Because I know the data. The data show that 62% of all the graduates in higher education in the United States are women. Our women have been the greatest success story of higher education in the last 40 years. And they have the greatest impact on a nation's economy because childbirth is better controlled. Families aren't expanding well beyond their capacity economically. And I've just gone around at every institution I've been, and I've just constantly challenged the men to keep up with the women. Because I know the data, and the data clearly shows that out.
Thank you very much. You educate a girl, and you educate the society. That's a moment for me to say that. We can take 2 questions from the online audience. I can see Dr. Muchanje and Chepkemoi Naomi. Please make it short in a few seconds so that we save time, kindly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just I just want to thank the presenters. That was very good. But I have a question for Prof. All through his presentation, he has been giving us an impression of that education needs to be privatized so that it gains value. But we know, even as America uses the voucher system, it is earning on the condition that education is supposed to be an economic investment, and therefore increase access and reduce discrimination. My question is, if we privatize all the institutions, are we not likely to lose the benefit of education as economic capital investment? Because, and Prof, maybe give us the insight of the voucher system in America, which somehow brings out the making the university private such as such, or education private, and how it gives us room for access. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mchanje. 2 minutes, Naomi Chepkemoi, please go.
Thank you so much. My question goes to Mr. Osundwa concerning inclusive education. In most inclusive education schools in Kenya doesn't have the facilities that supports the disabled students, which leads to stigmatization, especially for the pupils in primary schools. What is your advice then to the education stakeholders concerning this in order to avoid this stigmatization, which in turn has led to the low esteem or lowered the esteem of the disabled students, and which has led to the lack of interest eventually in education? That's my question.
Thank you very much. 2 questions from the audience in the room. And then we can wind up this question and answer session. Yes, Doc?
Thank you. My question goes to Mr. Osundwa. What percentage would you describe Kenya to be inclusive? Thank you.
As brief as that, we can have more questions.
Thank you. Mr. Osundwa, you talked about preparedness and also accessibility. What are we doing about the training of our teachers, primary school teachers, not the secondary? Because already we have, as our professor has said, we have an inclusive, the unit. What are we doing about the primary? The second question is to our president. Can we conduct a research? Because some of us have come from the fact that our education was financed by the government, from A levels up to the first degree, and we have had the opportunities to go. I've been in America for masters, I've been to Canada on a scholarship, I have been to Cambridge University, and all that was free. And I came from a very low family, and it has made a difference. Can we do a study to see, to compare when the education was free and when they are making it, the parents? The other thing is that I wish we had an opportunity to analyze the current university financing. Current. I was asked that question in the management, and I said, I'm not sure. But I'm saying if the parents can pay their students, then the government will decide who to sponsor. I wish we had an opportunity to analyze the current. Thank you.
For moving close to you, I know HELB is struggling with ascertaining who is deserving and who is not deserving now.
Thank you very much. I want to appreciate both presenters, Mr. Osundwa and Professor King, for your very insightful presentations. My question is to Professor King. There are a lot of similarities between what is happening in the US and what is happening in Kenya right now. But when I listened to your speech, I heard you say something along the lines of you're proposing to have the first 2 years of university to be tuition free, and that may help address the problem that you're having. So now I'm wondering, how sustainable would that be if you are to have the first 2 years of university to be free for the students, tuition free?
Thank you, Dean. I don't know who can go first.
Thank you for the questions. Just to say that the question around teacher preparation at the primary school level remains very important to all stakeholders in education. But I'll tell you the few challenges around the question of teacher preparation. Teacher preparation is a process. The process has to have policy guidelines. The process has to actually take into account training. The process has to take into account infrastructure at the school level. The process has to actually also appreciate the diversity of learners. Now, what we are currently facing as a country is that, yes, we have some policy provisions, but at the training level, we haven't comprehensively re-equipped or trained our teachers to appreciate inclusive education, just the same way we are still struggling to train our teachers to appreciate the CBC curriculum. So it's a journey that we must walk, it's a journey that we must take, and we can only take this journey through more studies, advocacy, sensitizing those who are in positions, and continuously demonstrating that there is a gap in that area. How many people or what percentage of our population is inclusive? That is a good question, tricky question. Inclusion does not just look at accommodating learners with disabilities in mainstream education. Inclusion is much more broader because it looks at preparing learning opportunities for everybody. Now, if you look at the holistic approach to inclusion, then you will appreciate that we are not yet a society that can say we are including many people. I'll give you an example. There are schools where girls are discriminated, not included. There are schools where people may be admitted on the basis of their tribe or ethnicity. There are schools where people may be admitted on the basis of their religion. There are schools where people may be admitted on the basis of their disability. So when you are excluded on the basis of your difference, that denotes exclusion. And on that basis, I think we are still way, way far from realizing our goal to inclusion. The third question, I think, was around primary education. There was something from, sorry, stigma, yes. So stigma, in my view, is a product of exclusion. It's a product of how we see others as different. When we normalize differences, then stigma reduces. Now, what has happened to learners with disabilities is that they have tended to be in spaces where most people don't understand them. They have been in spaces where they are completely in special schools. And so most learners without disabilities don't interact with them. They never appreciate that learners with disabilities are just a diverse group, but they can compete favorably with others. Therefore, stigma is a byproduct of exclusion. Now, the more we promote inclusion, the lesser the stigma we shall have. Thank you.
I think I'll go after the first one that talked about privatization and its impact on access. It's clear the more private publics and privates are, the less low-income students are going to have. and I just used this because I've used this in Congress. The 8 richest universities in the world are Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Brown, Dartmouth, Penn, Pennsylvania. These are the 8. They have almost $300 billion in endowments in the bank. They collectively have around 10,000 first generation, or what we call Pell Grant students, low-income students. All 8 of them have 10,000. When I was president of California State University, Long Beach, in Southern California, we had about 55% of our students were first generation, poorer students. Students of color, the university's student government looked like the United Nations. My one university in Southern California, we had 16,000 of these students, poor students, 16,000. And the collective private Ivy League with the richest endowments in the world can only muster 10,000. Sorry, it's clear they don't want to serve low-income students. It's clear they would rather follow rankings that rank their institution based on how selective they are. Not how many students they educate, but using these world rankings and the US News rankings, they get ranked by how many students they turn away, not how many they educate. That's the privatization model. That is the privatization model. With regard to your comment on Cambridge, you went to Cambridge. So Kenya is lucky you came home. Peter, my colleague at Florida Gulf Coast, is teaching in Florida. The United States was always open to international students, very much open to international students. In fact, it's been said that Silicon Valley was created with 1/3 international students that got visas to stay in America. So under President Trump, we shut the doors on international students. We shut the doors, not realizing the significance and the educational impact that can have on our own students. So we shut the doors. We're still trying to recover on getting international students. But our loss has been Canada and Australia's gain, because they've picked up the international students that the United States would have gotten. It's bad economics, it's bad human capital economics, and I commend the government for supporting students to go around the world and pursue their educational careers. But the most important thing a university can do, and I've always said this in government circles, the most important Kenyatta University can do is keep your educated best and brightest and steal everybody else's to bring to the country, because you're stealing their investments, those countries' investments. And that's the best thing Kenyatta can do to have a tremendous impact in Kenya and on the economy of Kenya. Regarding the last question on access, regarding the last question on 2 years of free college, we've got early evidence from the state of Tennessee that started free 2 years of college. Early evidence, and that started at 8 years ago. Early evidence shows that college attendance, the percentage of students pursuing college, has gone up significantly in Tennessee because they can get the first 2 years free. Other early evidence shows that the students that go on from 2 years to 4 years are only paying for 2 years of college instead of 4. So they're leaving college significantly less in debt than if they had paid for all 4 years. And in the United States, engineering, you have to pay for 5 years. So early evidence is that this is working. And that's why 8 other states have adopted the first 2 years going for free. And it also sends a message to students. What we learned in California was students don't decide whether they're going to college their last year of high school. They start deciding whether they're going to go to college in 7th and 8th grade. When they're 13, 14, and 15, not when they're 17 or 18. They've already decided by the time they're 17 or 18 whether they're going to college. They're making the decision on whether the college is for them when they're 13 years old. If they know that an institution has a spot for them and their first 2 years are free, more students go, more students influence other students to go. And that's the case that we've seen in the state of Tennessee. So thank you for your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for clapping. That was quite informative and interactive. I want to take this opportunity to recognize Madame Shinette Alexandra. It's not too late. If we were to give a calabash, she would get it, you wouldn't. Yeah, so please feel welcome. And thank you for accompanying Professor. Yeah, now at this point, I want to welcome the other speaker who is online, just to confirm, Carol. Is she online?
Yeah, she is.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Professor Jeanette from the Philippines. Are you referring to me, ma'am?
Okay, just give me a minute to introduce you. Thank you very much, and sorry for that. So next guest speaker is Professor Jeanette Diaz, who comes to us from Mariano Marcos State University, city of Batak in the Philippines. She is the Chief for International Faculty and Student Mobility at this university. Professor teaches English language and literature, and she has 30 years of experience in this. Her research interests include linguistics, language, literature, education management, and qualitative research. At this moment, I want to let you know that in 2008, she was recognized as the most outstanding teacher in the Philippines. Congratulations, Professor.
Thank you.
And now it's your moment. Thank you very much. Welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. Am I audible, ma'am? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Is my voice clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you clearly. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Please allow me to share screen. Please allow me to share my screen, ma'am, sir. Oh, because my screen says I am disabled to share my screen. So may I request the host to allow me to share my screen?
Yeah, we are doing that in a minute.
Yes, you are able to share. Kindly share.
Okay, so I'm going to share now. Thank you. Share, and then there you go. Is my screen visible now? Can you see my screen right now?
Yes,
ma'am, sir. All right, so that's good. Okay, so allow me to say my greetings to everyone. Dr. Paul K. Wainaina, the Vice Chancellor of Kenyatta University. Professor Samson R. Ondigi, the Vice Dean of the School of Education and Lifelong Learning. Dr. Martin Ogola, the Chairperson of the Conference Committee. Professor Langa Turua, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Outreach of Kenyatta University. Dr. Nelly Otube, the Deputy Executive Dean of the School of Education and Lifelong Learning. And of course, to all of you, my fellow educators, we say good morning. And in the Philippines, we say, naimbag abigat, magandang umaga po. So education and training institutions have been recovering and rebuilding after the pandemic. Now they are given the unique opportunity to reflect, redesign, refocus, and build back better. Likewise, we, the faculty and the personnel, were provided the avenue to rethink the way we educate our students and how to prepare them to an unpredictable future in a rapidly changing society. So innovative and pragmatic solutions developed and adopted during times of crisis now can challenge traditional delivery models and offer, of course, more effective or more accessible options. So as systems and institutions rebuild, they need to consider how resources can be redistributed to ensure that gaps in access and learning are narrowed down, so that inequalities within the workforce also need to be examined, ensuring, of course, a diverse representation, especially among education leaders. So building back better should also consider how education and training systems can be reoriented to become transformative, challenging discrimination, and acting as drivers for a more equitable distribution of wealth and power in the society. I'm so happy actually to be a part of this year's conference. The schedule was perfectly fine, although I entered a little bit late. The weather is good, although we just had an earthquake, 6.2 magnitude, and after experiencing actually 2 strong typhoons that really hit our province so hard, thank God that He has willed that I am attending one of the most fruitful conferences in education in another part of the world. Thanks for choosing me as one of the guest speakers. Thank you, Professor Samson, and of course, Dr. Lucy, who's been, very, very active also in our partnership with, of course, one very important activity, and that's the Aramid Conference. So my presentation centers on how the Mariano Marcos State University builds back better and highlights, of course, the different initiatives, innovative and pragmatic solutions in battling the challenges of education in the multiverse. It is anchored, of course, on the principle of sustainable development in the context of teaching, learning, and educational governance. And as one of the key personnel in the university's road to internationalization, I zero in on the internationalization initiatives in my talk. So my talk will be divided into 4 parts. My title gives you actually the subparts: dream, reimagine or refocus, work, achieve. But of course, I used the present perfect tense in my title. Something like I have dreamed, I have reimagined, I have worked, I have achieved. Okay, so all are in, or the title is in the present perfect to denote that the action, the initiatives happened in the past, but continue to be done at the moment of speaking. And yes, we never rest on our achievements and laurels. After all, education is a lifelong process. So the first one, the first subpart is dream. So I'm a little bit sentimental here, emotional here, because I am sharing you our practices and at the same time, my road to success in my job as a teacher, and of course, as a chief for internationalization, linkages, and partnership. Dreams. I was born a nobody. I don't have relatives that are influential in the government and in the academy. I was not even recommended at all to attend trainings and conferences on official business, meaning it's the university that pays for my expenses when I join contests, competitions, or conferences and trainings. I have to really pay for my own. So I never experienced that for 27 years. I had to save to pay for my own. But you know what? I am a dreamer and I had to save to pay. and I will always be definitely a dreamer. So I said to myself, and even to a few of my younger colleagues, create your opportunities. If you are not given a chance, make one for yourself. That, my fellow educators, has been my mantra. My love for children let me dream of big things. My mind played a lot in thinking of outreach activities for financially challenged and malnourished kids. I have my BASA project, a literacy program centering on the appreciation of regional literature and culture. I have conducted several researches on my own, presented these in conferences and fora, and published, of course, some. So when I was given a work to do, I was at my level best, be it in teaching, and of course, in coaching students to advising and whatnot. And I reaped the fruits of my labor, thanks, of course, to an organization, we call it the Metrobank Foundation Incorporated, because I was awarded, like it was mentioned a while back, the Outstanding Teacher Award in the Philippines. I really was noticed. And because of that, it was the start already of my real, as in real, academic journey. My dream slowly came to reality. So let me lead you now to the second sub part, and that is reimagine. I became a middle-level official in the university. At first, I was a director of the strategic communications, but I found myself better in the internationalization program of my university, given my exposure in world debating and teaching internships. So I had to do something worthwhile here. This was when I started reimagining. After all, I have a president who have really a definite, very definite path to trudge with her 7-point agenda achieved. So it's shown in the screen: A for academic excellence, C for creative, relevant, and innovative research programs, H, high impact and transformative extension, I for improved revenue generation and resource management, E for expanded external linkages and partnership, V for vibrant and engaging culturally focused university campus, and of course E, effective and efficient management. It was really a challenge to start our road to industrialization with a handful of members. Actually, in my team, there were just 4 of us. While we know that there are many requisites to become a better university, we took our internationalization efforts seriously. So what did we do? We crafted our strategic internationalization program, or the SIP. So we formulated policies in international mobility for both faculty and, of course, students. We renewed our ties with our brothers and sisters, actually, in the different parts of the globe. So MOU signing there, MOA signing here and there. And let me remind, of course, our administration of Kenyatta, our MOU signing, please, with MMSU. Maybe we can make a formal signing come this month, sirs, ma'ams. Okay, and then what we did also was to form an international coordinating committee or council in each of the colleges, and we put up our first internationalization video. So meetings here and there, and more importantly, we put our systems and processes in place by subjecting our institution to international standards. That's the ISO certification. Okay, now next, of course, there you go, some pictures of the ISO and some of our activities that we did. Third is work. Really, after the planning, after the reimagining and refocusing, we have now work, the real work. So we connected with organizations that help us grow. There is the University Mobility in Asia and the Pacific, or UMOP. Of course, we have the SIMIO, or the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education. We have our C-Teacher and C-TVET. Actually, we've been hosting many students from Asia to come to our university for free. Actually, free accommodation. That's what we can offer for our exchange programs. We have Erasmus Mundus also. We have the collaborative or the COIL programs. We have the International Credit Transfer Program, which we can offer also to Kenyatta University. And of course, we have a lot of faculty and student exchanges. If you will be interested, please, I will flash our email address towards the latter part of my talk. And of course, we also are members of the different organizations like the Prosper.net, AUN, and all. Okay, and many actually. And of course, we have our Commission on Higher Education, the CHED. We are actually a part of the Commission on Higher Education. And because of that, we really improved our statistics. Last 2 years, with the help of Dr. Peter and of course, Dr. Samson, because they were part of our first ever niche project. That's the International Teacher Education Conference. And of course, Dr. Lucy, one of our speakers. We started our international niche project in the different colleges. We had the first teacher education conference, like I said, and of course, a second that broke records in terms of attendance because we had an overwhelming more than 3,000 participants. Yes, in my conferences, I actually had more than 3,000 conferences for the second and the first, with 142 institutions and 24 countries attending in that. We also spearheaded the creation of the JPT-I6 Consortium, consisting of universities from Japan, the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, and of course, the United States. We are a micro campus of the University of Arizona in the United States. And another thing that we are very, very proud of is, of course, the conduct of the Aramid Conference. And of course, the honors is shared with Kenyatta University and Florida Gulf Coast because we are the three institutions that started the Aramid Conference. Aramid means action. Aramid means project. Aramid means research. Okay. And this conference showcased the projects of the different organizations of students around the globe. And we also designed courses for young leaders in sustainability that were offered to students all over the world. So we reached out to the different state universities and colleges, higher education institutions, and local government units for geospatial training, remote sensing, and of course, the establishment of a drone school here in our campus. So we hosted also several lectures as shown in our PowerPoint presentation. We have, of course, the Artes y Letras. It's a multicultural creativity and appreciation in education done with 5 series. And I would like also to offer this to Kenyatta University. It's sharing the culture and literature of Nairobi, Kenya, or the whole of the continent of Africa. We would accommodate that, as a matter of fact. So more importantly, we crafted the 4th Industrial Revolution or FIRE framework that rests heavily now on private and of course public partnership to develop the future's thinking and innovation ecosystem. So through this, there is actually an engagement of the academe, the industry, the community in developing the curriculum development, and of course the development of innovation and creativity skills through immersion, internship or OJT, and of course providing support mechanisms such as learning platforms or knowledge hubs, information technology, and of course innovation, student services, and shared laboratory facilities. So there is an academic and industry collaboration in our instruction. So our university, I must say, is crisis-proof because of embracing the fourth industrial revolution. Our system in education is designed actually for an automated data exchange system in manufacturing technologies that includes cyber physical systems, cloud computing, and cognitive computing, all to upgrade, of course, the education strategies, systems, and infrastructure to align with industry. And of course, specifically, it aims here to equip the faculty and, of course, the students with IR 4.0 skills, increase the interdisciplinary research, innovation, intellectual property, publication, and of course, technology adoption to improve efficiency and productivity through the optimized utilization of our resources. And so we adopt now new education tools and technologies, enhance the digital governance and develop digital technology, and of course, promoting the industry-university collaboration. That's actually our point now that our president would like to emphasize. Okay, so there you go, some snapshots of what we actually conducted in the different programs of our university. There you go, a news item on our systems, because our university is now a smart campus. It's S for seamless and secure connections, M for modern and upgraded equipment, A for automated and integrated system, R for reinforced research and development, and T, of course, for transformational and innovative technologies. So anywhere you go in the campus, in the different colleges, you can just click your laptops or your gadgets and bang, you're already connected to the internet free of charge. So I actually am sitting now in one of the benches here in our campus, or delivering my talk, and my internet is actually good. So that is why, you know, we have several, when we have proposals or for grants, we always take the opportunity to pass, and thank God we are actually given the chance to really do these projects. Last month, I passed a digital capability training workshop grant for teachers and pre-teachers, specifically centering on exploring IT education trends, which is a very good opportunity to actually share also, because this has been a very, very productive training for teachers and pre-teachers in the different universities of the Philippines and, of course, Asia. And now we have, of course, the fourth. There you go, some snapshots again of the conducted activities on IT, information technology, education, and training. Okay, now the last one is achieved. So what now? After what we have done, did it do us any good? Yes, of course, we achieved. We are now QS rated after how many years? 3 years of preparation and working on it. Times Higher Education rated. There you go, you can see it. Woody ranked, ISO certified, and we are now SUC level 4 as a state university. That's the highest in the Philippines, as a matter of fact. Okay, fast forward. I realized I have done something worthwhile. And as one of the instruments in putting our imaginations into fruition, from reimagining to refocusing to building back after the pandemic, to again assessing the impact of the initiatives, to again reimagining and planning for a better initiative, we really did not stop, and we will never stop improving. So I must say, leaders of education institutions, let us keep on refocusing and envisioning. We have to keep on dreaming. For I believe that reimagination, refocusing is the birthplace of vision and change. So your imagination is actually your most valuable talents that you have. and it deserves your full attention. We know that we could not rest on our achievements because seasons do change. So dream, reimagine, refocus, work, achieve. That's why I really love the theme of this conference on refocusing. And fellow educators, the cycle goes on because the life of an educator is indeed beautiful and challenging. So the future, we really do not worry about the future because possibilities are endless. So come on, my fellow educators, dream with me. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity. And I hope I imparted something new and something that we can learn from in today's conference. Once again, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much. From the Philippines in Southeast Asia, this is Professor Jeanette Dials Clark saying mabuhay.
Asante sana. Indeed, we will dream with you. Powerful, powerful presentation, and thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you.
You can hear how glad we are. We are clapping right here in the conference hall. I want to take just 2 questions. We are running late. So 2 questions for Professor, and then we can take the health break and proceed to the breakaway rooms. Any 2 questions, online audience or the audience in the conference hall? Caro, are there any questions from the online audience? I can't see.
I believe there are no more questions. So I believe they understood everything, ma'am.
I may not leave you go without a question, Prof. You have articulately put to us your journey in your education. Particularly, I'm interested in the fact that you are awarded the best teacher in your endeavors. I'm wondering the dream, how you really got to that. Being a teacher, I'm so curious to what could have been the tips that led you to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that question, sir. The tips on what made me a winner in the most outstanding teacher of the Philippines. Well, it's a matter of just being very, very active, not only in my teaching career, but also in the community, because I am also the president of the Faculty Association and the president of the Professional Association in my community. So really, I'm a very busy person when it comes to activities. Probably that's one. Another is on the achievements that I actually had, because I've been a multi-award. Sorry for being for mentioning it. Multi-awarded debate coach and trainer in the Philippines, and I've gone actually all over the world because of that. So they saw probably my advocacies also. I have a very important advocacy for children, and that is the BASA project. It's a literacy program for children in my community. We have our program on Saturdays, which is beyond office hours. We go to teach in far-flung areas. We go to the different barangays actually with our own money. Spending our own resources just so we could educate those people, those children who cannot afford really to go to schools that are better. And then I have an outreach program also for malnourished kids, and we do have feeding programs. My researches, I believe, also was a plus factor in winning the award. And demo teaching. You have essay writing, because I have the gift of writing also. And some others probably in the question and answer portion. All those are, so it's just a matter of putting your heart into the work that you do. Some people will notice it, and do not think of the award when you do it. Just keep on doing at your level best, and God will do the rest. That's what I believe in, sir. And
Thank
of
you
course,
very
work
much.
in the exigency of the service.
Thank you very much. Once more, I want to just take this chance to recognize the rapporteur, Dr. Margaret Makanya. Thank you very much, Dr. for taking notes throughout this session. We appreciate your effort. And also, I want to recognize Dr. Esther Waidaka, who should have actually taken over this session. Is she in? But in the interest of time, we decided to merge the two sessions. At this point, I will hand over back to the chair of the conference to guide us on the way forward. Thank you very much. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Olivia, for chairing this session. Chairing 3 guest speaker presentations is quite something. It really saps your energy. You have to concentrate for all that time. Other people can afford to walk in and out of the room, but for you, you know your attention will be focused on the speakers and steering the session. So thank you so much, Dr. Olivia. I'd also like to thank our rapporteur, Dr. Makanya, Asante Sana, for the good work. Now, just to notify our online audience that we're running a bit late because we started slightly late due to some unavoidable circumstances. But then we will be taking a health break, a brief one for 20 minutes. Then we come back. And when we come back, we won't have another break. We'll just have the 3 breakout rooms all the way until we are done. Yeah. So we apologize for that delay. We had some hitches. There's nothing much we could do about it. I'd also like to thank the audience who attended this morning's session for the very stimulating discussion and engagement. I guess we've all learned quite a bit from our interaction this morning. A conference is dull without, that engagement, lively engagement. Welcome. I saw our former dean, Professor Kombo, here this morning. Karibu sana, Professor. Feel very welcome. I hope you also have a presentation to make later in the day. If you have one, welcome. Those of you who are here and have presentations to make, I know most of you indicated that you'll be doing your presentations online, but we have the breakout rooms, physical breakout rooms. You're welcome to make your presentations from here. Today is one of those days when we have power interruptions on campus because of the repairs that are being done on the cable. So if you feel safer presenting from here, you're welcome to make a presentation from here because we are covered by the generator. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite everybody to take a break. Let's make it brief because we are running late. We don't want to finish this too late in the day. So we will take a health break for 20 minutes, then reassemble, and we go into our breakout rooms. I think we've been adequately guided on the breakout rooms if you're attending online. For those who are here physically, go to the physical breakout rooms. They are available and functional. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you in 20 minutes. Downstairs, there's a cup of tea,